When the 2025 draft kicked off with the selection of Miami's Cam Ward, Titans fans celebrated. For good reason. Ward was fantastic in his senior season and cemented himself as the number one quarterback in the draft. My issue is not with Cam Ward. What I aim to bring up with this video is a more wide-scale problem that many NFL teams face: drafting a quarterback way too soon in their process. Welcome to DNA Sports. Today we're going to take a look at the Titans' moves throughout free agency, the rest of their draft choices, and the existing talent on this team, or the lack thereof, that they're currently struggling with. Then hopefully some of you will be able to share our opinion that as great as Cam Ward is, he's not the issue, just not the solution either. Let's start by taking a look at the core of my argument: a lackluster Titans offense and defense for that matter, as well as a specific few prospects the team might have benefited from picking first. In a relatively weak class compared to recent years, there were a few prospects from this year regarded as genuine talents irrespective of their current peers. Personally, the one who stood out to me the most was a Penn State legend who spent this season carving up offensive lines on his journey to sack the quarterback. And if you don't know already, I'm talking about Abdul Carter. When you put everything into perspective, the Titans were tied for third worst in the league when it came to sacks, only getting to the quarterback for a total of 32 times last year. While I did appreciate that the Titans managed to secure Oluwafemi in the second round, he's still relatively unproven as an edge rusher, only getting a limited amount of snaps in college. I do understand if there are a lot of people that disagree with me. It's always the way I've tended to view this situation. I guess you can call it a personal philosophy of sorts. But I just believe that if there's someone to be considered generational like Abdul Carter is, it makes more sense to draft them and focus on figuring things out later. You don't need a smash hit success at quarterback when you have a guaranteed success at such an important position like edge rusher. I just believe that the potential impact Abdul Carter is able to bring to a team right now stands out more than most of his peers at this point in time. Ideally speaking, if the Titans were able to build on that in the draft, they could have used their second round pick to secure either cornerback option available at the time. Siobhan Revel or Will Johnson are both phenomenal, and while both of them had slight injury concerns, if you watched our Cowboys video, you'd know how we feel about Siobhan Revel. I thought he was one of the most enticing prospects, and especially for his draft value that he ended up going, there were so many players that went before him that I thought he was a lot better than. I feel like if the Titans were able to use their first two picks to address larger scale issues, this kind of transitions almost into another point, or I guess the main point of this, is that it builds a situation that a quarterback can inherit. Their whole defense would be resurrected if they put pressure on the quarterback, and potentially adding assistance and coverage in the second round, a part of their team that struggled due to ridiculously long time to throw for the opposing quarterbacks, will mean that the Titans defense will be young and also serviceable without as many glaring flaws to address going forward in free agency or even next year's draft. Another problem is Will Levis, who despite becoming infamous for his lack of brain power, is now forced to take a season off to fix his shoulder without receiving the trust and development that young quarterbacks should. There are very few players in the NFL that would be able to thrive in a situation that he was put in, but the Titans are not exactly totally free of weapons, I guess. They do have a pretty solid receiving core, with Calvin Ridley being a huge benefit, and they managed to strengthen one of their biggest problems, which was the god-awful offensive line. So that makes me think, if Will Levis has the arm talent, and he did prove to have some really promising flashes throughout the season, a lot of these interceptions and meme-worthy moments came after he'd been sacked like 3 times already. His confidence in the pocket was completely shot, and he had barely enough time to let the deep routes that he's capable of throwing develop, which kind of led to these forced throws and stupid interceptions. I'm not saying that, Will Levis is better than Cam Ward, or even that Will Levis is some Anthony Richardson type high-ceiling prospect. But I do believe that if you're going to draft a QB with such an early pick, the damage has already been done, so there's no further problem in letting them have an extra year to figure things out with a more serviceable team. For example, on a more first-hand level, let's say Will Levis doesn't exactly play amazing and you still think, hey, we should move on from this guy. Giving him a full season worth of film helps him on a trade level. You're able to get more value out of him and you can rebuild from a better starting point. The problem with moving on so quickly from Will Levis is in all the other ways the Titans could have possibly handled this. Cam Ward is probably not going to bring them to the playoffs until all the other holes are patched up anyways, so why not draft a quarterback in the next 2 years? Arch Manning, DJ Lagway, Drew Aller are among many names that are making up a stacked quarterback class for the coming years. Even Carson Beck is going to be ready next year. It just doesn't make sense if you look at what was available even in this year's draft. If there are people who are specifically worried about the Cam Ward pick because of preseason, I'd say that you're overreacting. I personally love that Cam Ward is willing to take risks, and he's an old-fashioned gunslinger that makes football really entertaining to watch. My only issue is that if you look at the amount of quarterbacks who went late, it's hard for me to convince myself that they're much better off with this player over some of these other options. I feel like it makes more sense to draft Shedeur Sanders in the 5th. Will Howard, Quinn Ewers, Riley Leonard, there's just very little downside to doing that, and a lot more upside if you desperately want to find a replacement for Levis. Something important to consider, especially when talking about quarterbacks, is that the best quarterback does not necessarily mean the best fit, especially not at this point in the rebuild. It's what I briefly mentioned earlier when I'm talking about inheritable situations. I fear that the Titans and Cam Ward might end up suffering a fate similar to what has happened to the Browns, Jets, Bears, and all the other QBs that have suffered after they were handed the reins to unfortunate teams. If we can learn anything from the many failures that these teams have, it's not the quarterbacks that are the end-all be-all. A pretty relevant example can be found in Minnesota. Sam Darnold managed to completely flip his entire career trajectory around just because he inherited a really good situation and was allowed to grow and evolve as a quarterback. And I know he got to, captain such a complete team with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, a great O-line, it goes on, but it's the fact that he could always play to this level that stands out to me when considering all angles of this debate. Even JJ McCarthy, who I'm not super high on as a prospect, has spent so long developing and learning on the bench, he gets to essentially stroll into the driver's seat this upcoming year. And I'd be really shocked if he's anything but excellent, with such a great scheme, great coaching, and so many diverse weapons around him. Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels are more great examples from last year that we can directly attribute to this. And while they both definitely played huge roles in the success that these teams have had this year, their roster was not perfect by any means. Bo did have a lot of help on one of the best defenses in the league, with PS2 and Nick Bonito having fantastic seasons, but even on offense, they had a lot of emerging young talent like Marvin Mims, especially towards the latter half of the season. Denver's offensive line was consistently good, and it was definitely responsible for helping Bo out despite the team's struggles in the run game and a generally weaker receiving room. It just goes to show that it's not a one-man job ever. Even these weaker teams that get quarterbacks that often seem like saviors to fans, it goes unsaid a lot of the work that plenty of other players do, not only on the line, but also even just simple receiving options. While Daniel's situation is similar, for the sake of the argument I'm presenting, it actually fits even better. Despite him basically bringing the franchise back into relevance pretty much single-handedly, don't forget all of the other crucial additions to the team that made it possible in the first place. McLaurin had another fantastic season, but managed to elevate his game as well. Running backs Eckler and Robinson Jr. did a great job combining for more than 1,000 yards between them. Given the state of sports debates where Jalen Hurts, for example, is criticized for having a good team, it can be easy to get lost in the semantics of this guy's better than this guy has more help, but I think what actually stands as the underlying point behind that is that football is not a one-person sport. Winning teams have winning contributors on basically every level, from management to coaching to the locker room. While fit is important, while environment is important, elite quarterbacks will always be elite, and there's no real question about that. As much as I do love Cam Ward, I haven't seen enough from him to justify drafting him with the number 1 pick and expecting him to be this next elite Class 1 S-tier quarterback. If you ask me, I think he's going to be good, and probably even really good, maybe even great, but I just don't think he's going to be able to live up to the potential that Titans fans, and I guess ownership as well, expect him to when the situation is this far behind other NFL teams. Where he is now, he's stuck on the same roster as another top 40 picked quarterback who, despite showing lots of promise at the collegiate level and even demonstrating elite arm talent in the NFL, was stuck in a QB battle for a team with no real chance of winning for the next couple years. If you're high on the Cam Ward pick, I really do understand. He's a great player, and drafting a quarterback will always seem like the best option, especially if there's one so talented available. There's a certain privilege associated with the number 1 pick in the draft, and I understand that as well, but I truly do think that if the Titans were smart, they'd draft either Hunter or Abdul Carter at 1. Maybe they could even trade down a couple spots if they really wanted to get the most value out of the pick. If I were to sum up the entire point that I'm trying to make, it's not that I think Cam Ward is bad. I just don't think he solves problems for this team yet, given the state of their roster. I always will value improving across the board and maybe taking a swing on a later round QB as a smarter choice, especially for a team like this. I think there's something to be said about drafting QBs before the structure has been built to house them. Who knows, this is all just speculation, and maybe Cam Ward can thrive in this situation. It's not the worst pick in the entire draft, but I think it's part of a larger issue in the NFL, with teams being largely unable to say no to their favorite quarterback prospects. Thanks for watching another video here on DNA Sports. I just want to say thank you for all the support that we've been getting on these recent videos. It's been crazy to see all the comments and likes on the video we made about defensive backs, and it's been seriously a joy to be able to discuss football in the comments with you guys, especially as we start to know more of you and your opinions. So this might be a little bit of a hot take video, I guess, but I'd still love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so let me know and we can talk some football. See you in the next one. Peace.